1982, the Northeast Ridge. Two of Britain's best climbers walk behind a wall of rock at 9 o'clock at night, and they are never seen moving again. 1988, the Southwest Face. Four climbers radio down that they can see the route home. 2 hours later, a storm hits with winds of 160 kilometers an hour. None of them are ever heard from again. 5 expeditions, 6 years apart at the widest gap, 8 climbers in total. And by the time this story is over, 7 of those 8 bodies will still be missing today. This isn't one disaster. This is 5, spread across 6 years, that all end the exact same impossible way. Welcome to Tourist Tragedies. You'd think that with better ropes, better forecasting, and 4 decades of climbing history behind us, these 5 deaths would at least make sense in hindsight. They don't. In 3 of the 5 stories you're about to hear, nobody, not a teammate, not a Sherpa, not one single witness, actually saw the person die. Here's what's actually known, and what is still just the best guess. March 16th, 1982. Base camp, Tibetan side, 5,180 meters. Chris Bonington's team has just arrived after a 3-day drive from Lhasa, and they're attempting something no one has ever finished: the complete east-northeast ridge, a line so long and so exposed that Bonington chooses to travel light. No line of fixed camps, snow caves instead of tents, minimal rope. The crux of the entire route is a series of 3 rock towers called the Pinnacles, sitting between roughly 7,900 and 8,400 meters, right where the ridge finally joins the North Ridge. Illness and exhaustion have already thinned the team's options by the time they reach this section, so 2 men go for it alone. Peter Boardman and Joe Tasker, already among the most accomplished alpinists in Britain, having put up a new route on Kangchenjunga and climbed the west wall of Changabong together. On May 17th, they move slowly past the first pinnacle. Down at base camp, Bonington and manager Adrian Gordon are tracking them through a telescope, which is how we know almost everything we're about to tell you. At 9 o'clock at night, in fading light, Boardman and Tasker are seen at the foot of the second pinnacle, 8,250 meters, having been climbing for 14 straight hours. Then they move behind the rock and they don't come back into view. No radio call, no cry, no visible fall, they simply stop appearing. For 4 days, Bonington and expedition doctor Charlie Clark hold on to hope, even hiking up the neighboring Kangshung Valley to check whether the pair had somehow ended up on the far side of the ridge. By May 21st, they accept the truth. The team's working theory, a fall from around 8,300 meters, was never confirmed. It was, and still is, an inference. 10 years pass. In the spring of 1992, Kazakh climbers on the same ridge find a body at roughly 8,200 meters near the second pinnacle. It's Peter Boardman, seated in the snow as though he'd simply stopped to rest. Joe Tasker has never been found, not once, in over 40 years. The part I find hardest to shake about this one is what happened the night before Tasker left. He had just handed over the finished manuscript of his book, Savage Arena. The Boardman-Tasker Prize for Mountain Literature was founded in their memory the following year and still runs today. Tasker's partner, Maria Coffey, later wrote about the grief in her own book, Fragile Edge, and when she was eventually shown the 1992 photograph of where Boardman was found, what struck her most was the sheer overwhelming loneliness of that spot. Same mountain, same spring, a different side of it entirely. On the Tibetan North Face, Lou Whitaker is leading an American team up the Great Couloir, a route so steep and so exposed that even experienced guides treat every meter of it like a live wire. Their strongest climber on this trip isn't a man at all. It's Marty Hoey, 31 years old, a professional guide who has climbed Mount Rainier more than 100 times and led expeditions on Denali. She's in position to become the first American woman to ever stand on the summit of Everest. May 15th, 1982. Hoey and teammate Jim Wickwire are on a 45-degree slope at about 8,100 meters, hauling gear up to establish Camp 6. routine, unglamorous work they've both done dozens of times before. This is the one death on this list with almost no mystery attached to it at all, because Wickwire is standing close enough to watch every second of it happen. So, how does one of the most experienced guides in the country die on a stretch of rope she's clipped into 100 times before? Here's the detail that makes it so hard to hear. Her harness buckle was an old-style manual buckle, the kind that has to be threaded back through by hand, nothing like the auto-locking buckles almost every climber uses today. Wickwire said Hoey leaned back on the fixed rope to let him pass. That's the moment the buckle let go. She fell backward, head down, sliding away from him down the fixed line. Wickwire later described hearing a small pinging sound, then turning just in time to see her already sliding. She reached for the rope as she passed it. She missed. She went over an ice cliff and fell roughly 1,800 meters into a crevasse without ever crying out. Her body was never recovered. What happened next says something about how this community absorbs loss. Lou Whitaker later said he couldn't imagine a more beautiful resting place for her. But he also said something far more painful, that the team spirit for the climb was simply gone after that, and nobody summited that season. The milestone Marty Hoey was one buckle away from claiming went unclaimed for 6 more years, until an American woman finally stood on the summit in 1988. I keep coming back to how small the failure point was here. Not a storm, not an avalanche, not altitude, not judgment, not weather. A strap that wasn't doubled back one extra time, on gear that, decades later, almost no modern climber would still be using. Bulgaria, 1984. Hristo Prodanov is his country's leading mountaineer, a metallurgical engineer by training who, 3 years earlier, made the first Bulgarian ascent of Lhotse, alone and without bottled oxygen. Now, he's deputy leader of a state-backed Bulgarian expedition, targeting one of the hardest lines on the mountain, the West Ridge. To understand what he's about to attempt, you need to understand the death zone, the altitude above 8,000 meters where there's so little oxygen in the air that a resting human body is already dying, slowly, even if it never takes another step. Almost nobody spends a second night up there voluntarily. April 20th, 1984, 5:45 in the morning. Prodanov and a Sherpa named Chawang Rinzi leave Camp 5 around 8,100 meters into clear, cold weather with no supplemental oxygen. Partway up, the Sherpa turns back. Prodanov keeps going, alone. At 6:15 that evening, he reaches the summit. He is the first Bulgarian to ever stand there. He is the first person in history to summit Everest in the month of April, normally considered far too dangerous a window to attempt. And he becomes only the 13th person ever to summit without bottled oxygen. But summiting that late means only one thing. He will be descending in the dark above 8,000 meters alone. At 9:10 that night, he radios base camp. He's going to bivouac because he can no longer see the route. Here's the part that should never have been survivable in the first place. He makes it through that night in the open, above 8,000 meters with no oxygen and no shelter. But the next day is the one that ends it. By the afternoon of April 21st, he reports over the radio that he's lost his gloves and warns that he'll soon lose the ability to even hold the transmit button down long enough to speak. A teammate begs him over the radio not to fall asleep. At 7:45 the next morning, there's one last click of his radio switch, then nothing. A 3-man rescue team starts climbing toward him, but can't reach him in time. His body has never been found. There's an epilogue here that very few people know, and it's the kind of detail that stops you cold. 20 years later, almost to the day, his niece, Mariana Prodanova Mazlarova, attempted her own oxygen-free ascent of Everest to mark the anniversary of her uncle's climb. She died of exposure at 8,700 meters. The gap between their deaths was 20 years and 30 days. October 1984. This expedition carries a heavier weight than most. It's led by Peter Hillary, son of Edmund Hillary, the first man ever to stand on Everest's summit back in 1953. Now his son is attempting one of the mountain's hardest and least forgiving lines, the West Ridge from the Western CWM, with 2 New Zealanders and 4 Australians. No bottled oxygen, no Sherpa support above base camp. If anything goes wrong up there, this team has no one to call on but each other. October 9th. 5 climbers leave a bivouac at 7,900 meters, aiming for the top. At 8,140 meters, 3 of them, Hillary, Craig Noddle, and John Muir, decide the wind is too strong and too cold to continue, and they turn back. 2 keep climbing, Fred Frum and Kim Logan, pushing on to about 8,200 meters, the expedition's absolute high point. That's when they see something falling down the mountain, and they turn around immediately, thinking someone below might need rescuing. What they'd actually witnessed was a death. During the descending group's retreat, Craig Noddle, 23 years old, a medical student with his whole career still ahead of him, lost his footing at the base of the Hornbein couloir and fell roughly 500 meters down the north face, the length of about 5 football fields, with no rope and no way for anyone to reach him. Now, here's the detail that makes this story almost impossible to sit with. Later, on his own way down, Fred Frum reached that exact same spot on the route, the identical patch of rock and ice where his friend had just died. And he fell too, down the same face. It was his 28th birthday. He had survived a fall on Makalu just the year before, and by every measure should have been one of the more careful climbers on that slope. Noddle's body was located on the mountain. Neither man's body could ever be recovered. Peter Hillary called off the expedition. 2 friends, the same few meters of rock and ice, the same afternoon. If you're looking for the exact moment a single bad step becomes unrecoverable at this altitude, this is it. What makes this one different from the others on this list is that there was no storm to blame, no mystery about the cause, no radio silence that stretched into speculation. 2 experienced men, on a route they had already decided was too dangerous to summit that day, were killed by the descent itself, which is a reminder that on this mountain, coming down is never the safe half of the climb. This last one might be the most extreme mountaineering achievement on this entire list, right up until it becomes the most complete loss. 1988. 4 climbers from Slovakia's Tatra Mountains, Dusan Bejčík, Peter Božič, Jaroslav Jaško, and Josef Just, set out to climb the southwest face, the route Chris Bonington himself once called the hard way. Their plan: no bottled oxygen, no fixed ropes, no Sherpa support above base camp. Pure alpine style, on a face many considered impossible to climb that way at all. Their permit was shared with a New Zealand team led by a man named Rob Hall, the same Rob Hall who would die on this mountain 8 years later, in 1996. They acclimatize by climbing Lhotse without oxygen, then commit to the face on October 14th. Progress is brutal. Hard ice, a difficult rock band, deep snowfields, forcing 3 separate bivouacs. By October 16th, they've reached about 8,600 meters, just below the south summit. Bejčík is sick, weak, and vomiting. They're behind schedule. October 17th. The group splits. Bejčík is too weak to go on and waits below the south summit. Božič and Jaško head toward the south col. Jaško's vision is blurring, likely from an altitude-related hemorrhage in the eye. Just continues alone. At 1:40 in the afternoon, just radios that he's on the summit, completing the first alpine-style, oxygen-free ascent of the southwest face in history. He stays maybe 15 or 20 minutes and starts down at 2 o'clock. The men regroup during the descent. The last radio contact comes at 5:30 that evening from about 8,300 meters, roughly halfway back to the south col. They say they can see the route. They say they're okay. They say they'll call again from the col in 2 hours. That call never comes. At 6 o'clock, 3 American climbers reach the south col in clear conditions and look up at the route. No climbers, no headlamps, nothing. By 11 that night, a storm slams into the mountain with winds up to 160 kilometers an hour, tearing tents apart lower down the slope. At base camp, Expedition leader Fiala offers Sherpas 25 times their normal pay to go up and search the col. Every one of them says it's too dangerous. No one goes. All 4 men are gone. The likeliest explanation is that the storm swept them off the route, or that they were lost on the Kangshung face trying to find shelter. But nobody knows for certain because nobody saw it happen. None of their bodies have ever been found. To this day, no one has repeated that route in alpine style. Reinhold Messner reportedly called it one of the greatest efforts in the history of Himalayan climbing. When you line these 5 stories up side by side, a pattern starts to form that has nothing to do with bad luck. Every single one of these climbers was doing something intentionally harder than it needed to be. No oxygen, minimal rope, minimal support. Because that stripped-down style is exactly what the mountaineering world respects most. And in 3 of the 5 cases, that same commitment to going light, going fast, and going alone is precisely why nobody was close enough to witness the end. Call it the visibility gap. The more a climber strips away, the rope teams, the fixed camps, the support, the more skill and history they earn, and the less chance anyone will ever know exactly what happened to them at 8,000 meters. 5 different mountains within the mountain, 5 different decades of equipment and experience, and in the end, the same outcome. A person above 8,000 meters, alone or nearly alone, who simply doesn't come back. Some people call alpine-style climbing. No fixed ropes, no oxygen, no Sherpa support. The purest, most respectful way to climb a mountain like this one. Others call it recklessness dressed up as purity. Given everything you just heard, which one do you think it is? Let me know in the comments. I read every single one.